There's a liquid sitting on a shelf at your local hardware store right now that permanently stops wood rot at the molecular level. It costs $4 per quart. One application protects the wood for decades, not years, not until the next rainstorm. Decades. The United States Navy has been using this compound to protect wooden naval structures since before World War I. Utility companies still use it today to protect the bases of every wooden power pole carrying electricity to your home. Telephone poles treated with this compound in the 1950s are still standing without structural rot. And if you own a deck, a fence, a porch, or any outdoor wood structure, there's a very high probability that the contractor who built it never mentioned this compound existed, not because they did not know, because knowing it exists makes their next job harder to sell. The average wood deck in the United States lasts between 10 and 15 years, before visible rot requires either major repair or full replacement. Replacement costs between $8,000 and $20,000, depending on size and region. Minor rot repair, when caught early, runs between $1,500 and $4,000 for a standard deck. The decking industry generates approximately $9 billion annually in the United States alone, and a meaningful portion of that revenue depends on wood failing at a predictable rate. A $4 compound that stops that failure permanently is not good for that business model. This is the story of pentavalent boron wood preservative. What it is, why it works, what happened to the version that worked best, and exactly how to use what remains available to permanently stop rot in any wood structure you own. The year is 1938. A forest products researcher at the United States Forest Service Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin, is working on a problem that has plagued wooden construction since human beings first built anything. Wood rots. It rots in the ground. It rots in contact with moisture. It rots when fungi find it. And fungi find it because wood is essentially a food source for organisms that have been eating it for hundreds of millions of years. The researcher, working within a broader federal program on wood preservation, is investigating inorganic boron compounds, mineral salts derived from the element boron, which occurs naturally in soil and in trace amounts in almost every plant you have ever eaten. Boron compounds had been known to have antifungal properties for decades. What the Forest Service research established was the mechanism, and the mechanism turned out to be more significant than anyone initially expected. When a boron-based compound in liquid solution is applied to wood, it does not coat the surface. It diffuses into the wood's cellular structure, drawn inward by capillary action, the same force that pulls water up through the grain of a piece of lumber when one end is placed in a puddle. The boron solution follows that same pathway, traveling deep into the wood fiber until it reaches equilibrium with the surrounding moisture content. Once inside the cellular structure, the boron doesn't simply sit there. It becomes part of the wood's chemistry. Boron interferes with the metabolic processes of the fungi and insects that cause rot and structural damage. Specifically, it disrupts the enzyme systems these organisms use to digest cellulose, the primary structural component of wood. Without functioning enzyme systems, wood-destroying fungi cannot metabolize the cellulose they need for energy. They cannot grow. They cannot reproduce. They die. The wood itself is chemically unchanged. Its structural properties are unaffected. Its appearance is unchanged. Boron solutions are colorless, but the biological conditions that cause rot have been permanently altered at the cellular level. This was not a surface coating that could peel, crack, weather, or wear away. The boron was inside the wood, and it stayed inside the wood, protected from weathering, as long as the wood remained dry enough to prevent leaching. By the 1940s, the Forest Service research had been validated extensively, and boron wood preservation had become standard practice in specific high-risk applications. Agricultural buildings in contact with soil, utility pole bases, marine dock structures, anywhere wood met the conditions most favorable for rot, moisture, soil contact, limited air circulation. The compound worked. The documentation was clear. The mechanism was understood. Here's the chemistry that makes boron wood preservation chemically irreplaceable by any surface coating system. Wood-destroying fungi, the organisms that turn sound structural lumber into soft, crumbling material that fails under load, operate through a specific biochemical sequence. They secrete extracellular enzymes, primarily cellulases and hemicellulases, that break the chemical bonds in cellulose and hemicellulose fibers. These broken fibers become the fungus's food source. The structural integrity of the wood depends entirely on those fibers remaining intact. Boron interferes with this process at two distinct points. First, boron ions bind to the active sites of the enzymatic proteins the fungi secrete, the specific molecular locations where the enzymes do their chemical work. A bound active site cannot catalyze a reaction. The enzyme is effectively disabled before it reaches the wood fiber. Second, and more significantly for long-term protection, boron disrupts the oxidative phosphorylation pathway inside fungal cells, the process by which fungi produce energy from the cellulose they digest. Without functional energy production, fungal cells cannot sustain the metabolic processes required for growth or reproduction even if they manage to reach the wood surface. The result is not fungal repulsion. Fungi can still contact boron-treated wood. The result is fungal collapse at the cellular level. The wood becomes biologically uninhabitable for the organisms that destroy it. The same mechanism operates against wood-boring insects. The boron disrupts the gut enzyme systems of larvae attempting to digest wood fiber, preventing the energy extraction that sustains their development. Larvae that ingest boron-treated wood do not survive to adulthood. This is not a topical barrier that insects and fungi must physically avoid. It is a chemical environment that renders the wood itself toxic to the organisms that consume it. That distinction is why surface coatings, paints, stains, sealers eventually fail against rot. They are barriers. The moment the barrier is breached, the biology resumes. Boron does not create a barrier. It changes the chemistry of the wood itself. The most effective application of this principle was a product category called pressure-treated timber, lumber in which boron compounds and other preservatives were forced deep into the wood structure under hydraulic pressure before the lumber reached the retail market. But for existing structures, a deck already built, a fence already installed, a porch column already in place, the relevant technology is penetrating boron solution, a liquid you apply to the surface that diffuses inward, reaching the cellular level where the protection operates. These products were widely available, affordable, and straightforward to apply through the late 1980s. The most effective formulations were high-concentration sodium borate solutions, the same basic chemistry the Forest Service had documented in the 1940s. They were sold by independent suppliers, recommended by extension services, used by preservation contractors. Then the wood treatment industry underwent a significant restructuring in the late 1980s and 1990s that changed what products were available to homeowners and what products their contractors recommended. The restructuring had a specific economic driver. High-concentration sodium borate solutions are simple chemistry. The active compound, sodium tetraborate, commonly known as borax in its raw form, cannot be patented. It is a naturally occurring mineral. Any manufacturer can produce a sodium borate solution. There is no proprietary formulation, no trade secret, no patent protection that allows a single company to control the market. In an unprotected commodity market, price competition drives margins to near zero. You cannot build a sustainable business model around a product anyone can replicate at low cost. What you can build a sustainable business model around is a proprietary synthetic formulation, a polymer-based water repellent, a penetrating oil treatment, a surface sealer with a branded chemistry that your competitors cannot legally copy. These products can be patented, they can be priced at premium margins, they can be marketed with performance claims tied to specific formulations that require repeat purchase as they weather and degrade. The deck care product category that exists today, the rows of branded sealers, stains, water repellents, and wood tonics at every hardware store, is a replacement market. It replaced a commodity product that worked better, not because the replacement products are superior, because the replacement products generate recurring revenue and the commodity product does not. A homeowner applying a high-concentration sodium borate treatment to new deck lumber before construction would be protecting that wood against rot for the life of the deck. There's no follow-up product to sell. There is no annual maintenance protocol that requires another purchase. There is no degradation schedule. That is the economic profile of a product that disappears from the shelves of a retail channel optimized for repeat purchase. The contractor dimension of this story is as significant as the manufacturer dimension. When a deck replacement is quoted, the contractor's revenue comes from two sources: materials and labor. A deck that lasts 25 years instead of 12 generates half as many replacement jobs per homeowner relationship. For a contractor running a repeat customer business, the useful life of the structures they build has a direct inverse relationship with their revenue. This is not a conspiracy. It is arithmetic. A contractor who recommends a $4 treatment that doubles the life of a deck is recommending against their own economic interest. Most contractors are not malicious. Most contractors simply do not recommend things that reduce their own revenue, which is the same decision every business makes every day without requiring any coordination or conspiracy. The result is the same regardless of intent. The treatment that would protect your deck permanently is not mentioned in the conversation where you're deciding what to build your deck from and how to maintain it. The conversation you have is with someone whose interests are served by the deck requiring maintenance and eventual replacement. What can you actually do with this information right now? Here is the complete application protocol for both new wood and existing structures showing early rot. For new wood or sound existing wood, the application is straightforward. Purchase a penetrating sodium borate wood preservative, sold under various brand names including Timbor, Boracare in its diluted residential formulation, or generic sodium borate solutions through agricultural and forestry supply channels. The active ingredient is sodium tetraborate decahydrate. Confirm it is listed on the product label. Mix according to product directions, typically a 10 to 15% solution in warm water. Warm water matters because boron dissolves more completely at higher temperatures, producing a more concentrated active solution. Apply to clean, dry wood with a brush, roller, or garden sprayer. The wood should be as dry as possible before application. Boron solution follows moisture gradients into the wood, and a wood surface already saturated with water has a limited capacity to absorb additional solution. Apply generously. 2 applications are more effective than 1, with a 4 to 6 hour drying period between coats to allow initial absorption. For horizontal surfaces, deckboards, steps, flat railings, where water pools rather than runs off, pay particular attention to end grain. End grain is the cross-section of wood fibers exposed at cut ends, and it absorbs moisture at a rate approximately 10 times higher than face grain. End grain is where rot almost always begins. Seal it thoroughly with extra solution and allow extended absorption time. Total material cost for an average 400 square foot deck, approximately $12 to $20 in boron solution. Application time, 2 to 3 hours. For wood already showing early stage rot, soft spots, surface discoloration, the slightly punky texture where wood fiber is beginning to break down, the protocol adds 1 step. The rotted area must be treated before structural repair. Purchase a consolidant, a penetrating epoxy or liquid hardener, specifically formulated to rebond the degraded wood fibers of rot-damaged wood before filler is applied. These products are available through marine supply channels where wood rot repair is a critical maintenance category, and through specialty woodworking suppliers. Apply the consolidant to the affected area according to product directions. The liquid penetrates the degraded fiber, surrounds the individual wood strands that have lost structural integrity, and cures into a hardened matrix that restores the wood's ability to hold a screw or support the weight it is designed to bear. Once the consolidant has fully cured, typically 24 to 48 hours, apply the boron treatment to the surrounding wood to prevent the rot from progressing from its current boundary. For significant structural rot, where wood has softened through more than a third of its cross-sectional thickness, an epoxy wood filler can restore the structural profile of the damaged member without requiring replacement. Marine epoxy wood fillers have been used to restore deteriorated wooden boat structures under conditions far more demanding than any residential deck. A deckboard restored with consolidant and epoxy filler, then treated with boron solution, can outlast untreated replacement lumber installed beside it. Total material cost for a typical rot repair using this approach, $40 to $80 in consolidant and filler, plus $12 to $20 in boron solution. Total contractor, quote for the same repair, $600 to $1,500, before the recommendation to replace the entire deck section. The Forest Service research that documented boron wood preservation in the 1930s and 1940s is still published and still available. The chemistry has not changed. The biology has not changed. Sodium borate is still on the shelf at agricultural supply stores, sold as a laundry booster and pesticide under brand names that have been in American hardware stores for a century. The knowledge connecting that chemistry to wood preservation was not lost. It was simply made inconvenient to find in a market that rewards the inconvenience. Utility companies know this. They still treat wooden power poles with boron compounds before installation. Naval architects know this. They specify boron treatment in the preservation protocols for wood and marine structures. Forestry professionals know this. Extension services in timber-producing states still publish boron treatment guides for agricultural wood structures. The information was always available to people whose professional context gave them a reason to look for it. Homeowners were not given that context. They were given a deck stain aisle and a contractor who builds the same deck every 12 years. Now you have the context. The $4 liquid that stops rot permanently has been documented since 1938, validated by the Forest Service, used by the Navy, and confirmed by 80 years of application in the most demanding structural environments. Your deck is not a naval installation. It is not a utility pole in contact with soil for 40 years. The chemistry that protects them will protect it too. The treatment takes 3 hours. The protection lasts decades. Every year you delay is a year of rot biology operating in wood you paid for and can protect for less than $20. The information has been here the whole time. Now so have you.